"10 million people came to America from all over the world during the 20 years before 1900. America, where streets were paved with gold. What did they discover? They found plenty of food, but very little gold. Only one immigrant in 10 million would become a multimillionaire. For the rest, it was usually 16 hours of work a day, 6 days every week, for about $800 a year in wages. But for the one industrialist in 10 million who made it all the way to the top, the pay scale was $20 million a year. The foundations for such great wealth were permissive and corruptible governments, sharp business practices, and the exploitation of immigrants who were helpless without the English language. In the fall of 1901, the nation went into mourning for William McKinley, 25th president, who died of an assassin's bullet. His vice president, Rough Rider Theodore Roosevelt, became our chief executive. Here you see this youngest American president in history, just 42 years old. The new president pledged to support a long-standing White House policy which favored big business. Would Teddy Roosevelt, the product of wealth and aristocracy, continue to permit America's malefactors of great wealth to control the nation's destiny? Here are some of the men who would care about his decisions. J. Pierpoint Morgan, symbol of Wall Street banking and boundless wealth. Morgan had once actually bailed out the country from financial collapse. Jacob Riis, Danish-American journalist. He would inform his old friend, Colonel Roosevelt, of the conditions of the poor. Upton Sinclair, a determined young reporter, most promising of the muckrakers. He would seek the president's ear. James Clarkson, a shrewd Republican politician with his eye on Roosevelt's election campaign. He would aim to hold on to Wall Street's campaign contributions. With his administration facing its first test at the polls, the question is, whose voices will this president heed?
Mr. President, the committee is waiting, and you're going to be late.
Splendid. They'll have plenty of time to study my proposals. You're sure you've listed everything?
Yes, sir, everything.
And they have all received the list?
Yes, Mr. President, all of them. Postmaster General Henry Payne, Senator Matthew Quay, James Clarkson, Surveyor of the Port of New York.
I'll wager my friends will be delighted. Kermit!
Gentlemen, you have seen my proposals. We must ensure a square deal for labor and see that there are child welfare laws. It is high time to stop the lumber and cattle men from raping the land. Government supervision is long overdue. Gentlemen, it is time to abolish privilege.
That sounds dangerously close to socialism, sir.
It is precisely the way to combat socialism. If we don't institute a program of reform, the working people of this country are going to think everything is corrupt.
Well, now, Colonel, that's going to make a lot of people unhappy.
That's your opinion, Jim?
I don't hold much with opinions. The fact is that as long as congressmen are given privileged information about the land where the new rails will be laid and the franchises that will be granted, that information has a sweet sound to it. The sound of silver dollars being poured into the pockets of our lawmakers.
That is exactly what made me angry and why I want to do something about it.
Forgive me, Mr. President, but you do not have a mandate from the people. You inherited this office, and until you're elected, if you are elected, you will be dependent upon the Congress.
Yes. Put him on.
Mr. President, this is Pierpoint Morgan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Morgan.
I've been informed that you have ordered the Justice Department to bring suit against the Northern Securities Company. Is that correct, sir?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because you have put together a combination of railroads that monopolize the transportation facilities in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act.
The Sherman Antitrust Act has been dead for years.
And now it's come to life. Isn't that splendid?
Mr. President, if we've done something wrong, you tell your man to see my man and they can fix it up.
We don't want to fix it up. We want to break it up.
Are you going to attack any other my interests?
Certainly not. We will not attack your other trusts. Unless, of course, we find out that they have done something wrong. Gentlemen, we have just moved the United States government from Wall Street back to Washington.
Who does Morgan think he is, talking to the office of the presidency that way? Have your man see my man. Of all the forms of tyranny, the most vulgar is the tyranny of wealth.
Well, you may have stopped Morgan in his tracks, but you've lost all the big money from the railroads.
I'm not worried.
Neither is Mark Hanna. He would like to be the next person in the White House, and railroad money alone would get him there. Quay is right, you know. You don't have a mandate from the people.
The people know I'll take care of them.
But how do you know what people want? You're not that close to them. Remember when you were back in New York and you went after the saloon keepers to stop them from bribing policemen who let them stay open on Sunday? So you closed those bar rooms. But the people didn't want that. They'd rather have some corruption and beer on Sunday. They knew the rich had their clubs to go to, so they fought you. And the newspapers killed you on it, too.
They made too much out of that.
You were too impetuous.
Perhaps.
Newspapers are going to be after you again after they find out about this Morgan business.
I can take care of that.
Don't you think it'd be wiser to move more slowly? You have so many things underway already. And why do you feel you have to take the time to see people like Upton Sinclair? You know he's after something. All of them are.
Jim, I appreciate your advice, but I can't change the way I am.
Mr. Sinclair, good to see you. Hope you don't mind meeting me down here.
No, sir, not at all.
I'm on a very tight schedule.
I'm sure you are, Mr. President. So this is how you keep so fit, sir?
Partly, I find sparring helps me to keep. You don't spar, do you, Mr. Sinclair?
No, sir, not really. I write.
Yes, I know that. I like writers. Though I must admit, the feeling isn't always mutual.
And I like fighters, sir. That's why I'm here. So may I help you with that?
Oh, thank you.
John L. Sullivan used to fight with bare knuckles, didn't he, sir?
Who do you want to fight, Sinclair?
The meat packers.
The meat packers?
That's right, sir.
Sinclair, I have said my piece on the meat packers. When I was still in the cavalry, back from Cuba, I told the Senate I would rather eat my old cavalry hat than the rotten beef the meat industry was unloading on the Army.
Yes, and that's where you're going to leave it, Mr. President.
Reform doesn't come with a lightning bolt. You work on senators, you work on congressmen, You line up committees. You lobby. It's a long, hard road.
Well, I guess it is, sir, when you're dealing with problems that are hard for the people to understand.
There are very few problems that the people do understand, Mr. Sinclair.
But, Mr. President, here we're dealing with sausage meat. We're talking about the public belly, if you'll allow me, sir. The working man's dinner pail, schoolboy's lunch.
You have a point there.
Sir, if the public had even an inkling of what went into their sausage.
Have you?
So they run anything and everything through the grinders. Poisoned rats, pigs swollen with disease. It all comes out sausage.
What?
So Dr. Jacques was head of the meat inspection. He fought hard to have diseased meats condemned.
Has he given up?
He was fired, sir.
What about the men who work the stockyards? It's their duty to put a stop to this.
So most of them don't speak English. Those who do, those who open their mouths, get laid off, blacklisted, or worse.
Where's the proof for all this?
Sir, I've seen the cooking rooms. A man works up to his ankles in pig's blood and fat scraps, and he tries to walk carefully because the steam from the boiling lard begins to choke him, blind him. Sometimes, sir, a man slips. A few weeks later, you can buy him across the counter. Sir, I know the facts. I plan to go to Chicago, live in the stockyards, walk through the stench, and I plan to write a book about what it really is. One large, filthy jungle.
You produce the evidence, Sinclair. You get up the evidence, I'll bang some heads together. Sausage men, lard men, armors, all the other meat packers. By George, the whole kit and caboodle. Splendid afternoon, Sinclair.
He's a jolly good fellow.
He's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny. Speech, we'll have a speech, Jake.
When our son was a young boy, he used to write very short stories. I like this one. Once, in an excited land, there was something. Well, I think in this excited land, the Roosevelts are something special. And I am grateful for the years we have shared, and that's all.
That's lovely of you, Jacob. Shortest speech he ever made.
Oh, I must save much for the candles, huh?
It's time to make a wish, Jacob.
I wish that you, Mr. President...
Mr. President?
That you, Theodore, will bite into this birthday cake as hard as you may bite into the corruption that surrounds us.
You are always a crackerjack reporter, Jake. When it comes to sniffing out a story, you have a nose like Pinocchio. You know I'm going to take on the Standard Oil Company, don't you?
Yeah? It's a good beginning.
Now, Jacob.
Beginning.
I have bumped the Beef Trust. Congress has acted on my proposals to abolish railroad rebates as nothing more than a rich man's privilege. One way or another, I am going to set up a Bureau of Corporations with the power to investigate industry. We're going to ruffle some feathers, Jake.
Well, you have a large barnyard to choose from. Lots of roosters are crowing. Rockefeller, Hill, Morgan.
The courts have already dissolved Morgan's Northern Securities Company.
But is that enough, Theodore, just to attack big business?
I believe in starting at the top. The benefits of these reforms will filter down to the people. I have got to face reality. In modern times, corporations are a fact of life, and I have got to deal with these facts.
Well, poverty is a fact. Despair is a fact. It is also a fact that poor people have votes.
Just hold on now.
Now, Theodore. Jacob, you promised a surprise for Theodore.
Yeah. Well, perhaps another time.
Come on, Jake. What's the surprise?
I bought the photographs for my new book. Their only home is an alley. Their companions, rats. It is a Polish family. Well, not quite a whole family. A baby had died the day before from starvation. It was very still, very cold that morning. There was only one sound. The coughing of that woman. She has tuberculosis. She lives by herself on that roof to try to recover. That is her hospital room. He's a coal heaver. He's starving because the owners have shut down the mines. The miners want decent working conditions and an 8-hour day. They want recognition of their union. Families are living on chickweed and dandelion soup. But it's hard to pick dandelions when your fingers are frozen. Well, at least the miners have John Mitchell to fight for them.
But only for the miners, Jacob. When the mine shut down, hospitals and schools and businesses and governments all shut down too. Jacob, this is bigger than 100,000 miners against a handful of operators. This affects all the people. And I think I know what the people want.
Mr. President.
Gentlemen, you must realize that this strike affects the public at large. There are 76 million men, women, and children in this country, and they depend on coal. Mr. Baer, you mine owners speak of property rights. There are also the rights of man, specifically of the laboring man. And Mr. Mitchell, as leader of the United Mine Workers, I charge you too with a grave responsibility to the public.
Mr. President, I sincerely believe that God is on our side.
Perhaps we should seek the advice of clergymen to arbitrate this dispute.
Coal mining, Mr. Mitchell, is a business, not a religion. And I want you to understand this. We will not surrender, even if it means crippling industry, stagnating business, or tying up the commerce of the world.
It's good to know that you have such an open mind. For our part, Mr. President, we are willing at any time to submit the workers' claims to an arbitration committee.
Common sense demands, Mr. President, that an injunction be issued, and if need be, that you use the army to end the strike.
Mr. Baer, I am fully prepared to use troops.
Mr. President, do you
I repeat, I am fully prepared to use troops to produce coal.
You don't have the right to dispossess us.
Really, Mr. Baer? For the first time in our country's history, the American public is represented at a bargaining table. Gentlemen, I am that public. Now, I'm going to leave you here together, and I feel sure that you will practice the splendid art of compromise.
By God, he called her bluff.
He's riding pretty high, Jim. I just hope it doesn't go to his head. You know, that big stick he carries around with him could turn out to be a boomerang.
We've got an election coming up. You know how the big money feels about his reform projects. They're certainly not going to underwrite them.
How on earth are we going to raise money for his campaign?
Well, now, there are 100 ways to skin a cat. 100 ways to pour a little oil on the water, smooth things down, make life a little sweeter. A good many years ago, I ran a newspaper in Iowa, one of the best. You can't do that unless you make friends. Friends who listen. Friends who write what you want them to write. Gentlemen, friends are indispensable in life. Now, tomorrow, you're going to see a newspaper editorial on this page. It will say that the president did indeed attack the railroads for granting rebates on freight rates, secret rebates, to special influential companies like Standard Oil. But
that's exactly the kind of thing that'll kill him.
Not so fast, Bill, not so fast. I wasn't finished. The editorial will then get to the point that actually the president has no intention of launching any wild-eyed attacks on the good and true men of industry. That he is not an anarchist. That he is a reasonable man, dedicated to promoting progress in this great country. It will be, my friends, a very reassuring editorial.
Have you seen it?
I wrote it.
Reliable sources have implied that Mr. Roosevelt will not tolerate a doctrine which would allow government interference with American businessmen. Corporations are individuals too. Reliable sources. There is only one reliable source who can report on the president, and that, Edith, is the president himself.
It's only one newspaper, Theodore.
It will be quoted across the country by every jackass and weasel.
You've worked on that speech for a week.
I have just written a new one. Edith, I am going to fight on this issue.
Every executive officer in high position is a steward of the people, bound actively and affirmatively to do all he can for the people. I believe it is not only the president's right, but his duty to do everything that the needs of the nation demand. A democracy can be such, in fact, only if there is some rough approximation of equality of stature among the men comprising it. One of us can deal in our private lives with the grocer or the butcher or the carpenter because we are all of approximately the same size. But a rich and complex industrial society cannot so exist for some individuals, and especially those artificial individuals called corporations become so very big that the ordinary individual is utterly dwarfed beside them and cannot deal with them on terms of equality. I want to act for the common well-being of all our people, whenever and in whatever manner necessary. certain fundamental human rights must be maintained. The right to a living wage. The right to reasonable hours of labor. The right to decent working and living conditions. The right to freedom of thought and speech and industrial representation. In short, to a worthy and decent life according to American standards.
Now, Kermit, it's up to the people. If they think I'm wrong, why then, Kermit, we should go back to Oyster Bay. The people must decide whom they want in the White House.
Gosh, Papa, I hope it's you.
Me too, Kermit. Me too. Come on, I'll race you.
The right man at the right time. Theodore Roosevelt, with his first mandate from the people, could now launch the age of economic and social reforms that would divide future generations into three camps: the liberals, conservatives, and radicals of the 20th century.